Hi, I'm Craig, and today on the Everyday Makers, I'm going to take my table saw's miter gauge from this to this, basically giving it extra room, extra distance. It's a 7-inch wide miter gauge. I'm bringing it up to about 13 and a half. This will help me keep everything straight as much as possible. I've been working on some pieces lately that were relatively short pieces. Probably could have done them on the miter saw instead, but the table saw was ready to go. I was using it, but they were just hanging on the edge, and I wasn't really getting a good bite to hold them in place and keep them steady. This should fix that problem for me. So that sounds like something of interest to you. Let's do it. Okay, we're going to start off by cutting some aluminum. I have 1-inch square stock. It's an 8-foot piece, but that's irrelevant. So what I'm actually cutting is I'm cutting two 14-inch pieces. I actually only need 12 and a half-ish, 13-ish, but I'm cutting them oversized, so then when we get done, I can line it up with the table saw and cut everything to size exactly. So this gives me a little bit extra, and aluminum's fairly cheap, so it's easy to do. So I cut my first piece and measured that, and then I'm just using the original piece to cut the second piece, because it's something that really does not have to be perfect. They're both going to get cut together later. So this is just close enough, don't waste any aluminum kind of thing, but not a finished cut. Table saws are great for cutting aluminum. Miter saws are great for cutting aluminum. People never quite realize that a wood blade will do just great on aluminum. Doesn't really mess it up. Okay, now that I've got my two pieces, these are my main two. There's also a piece that's 2.5 inches long, but that'll show up later. These are the main rails. So you're going to start out by doing 4 pilot holes. I did 4 to basically give it the most even pressure all the way across. You could probably use 3, you could use 5, you could use 50, I don't care. 4 is what worked for me. It seemed to have really good hold all the way around. And you want to do it inset from the outside, since, as we discussed before, you'll be cutting the very ends off. So you want to go at least probably 2-3 inches in. Then use a step bit and open up one side of the hole. So basically on one side of the rail, you're going to open up the holes big enough to accommodate those panhead self-tapping screws that I've got in the background there. Those things, the panhead on them is probably 3/8 of an inch, give or take. So you got to open that up so that actually the screw will completely go inside of the rail. So you're screwing from one side through the center into the next rail. Now it comes time to go ahead and work on the second rail. The second rail will get 2 holes, but I have to measure for center first to make sure where my center's at, because both of these are going to hold actually the top piece, which is the 2.5 inch piece, and that's what actually clips to the miter gauge. So I'm going to screw in from the underside of that, so it won't have screws on top. So essentially, your screws won't necessarily be visible at all. And these two I'm doing relatively close to the center line, but one's closer to one side, one's closer to the other, and they're both offset just a little bit from the center line. Gives everything the most clearance so the panheads don't hit each other, and it'll give it left, right, as well as front, back grab by offsetting them. So after got those two, next thing we're going to do is we're going to build ourselves a little jig. Let me clean up here real quick. Metal shavings just get everywhere. So this is the piece we're attaching. We're going to set up a little jig with our 1, 2, 3 blocks. They're great for doing a 90-degree jig with 2 of them. It's perfect. It gives you a solid 90-degree angle, You can clamp down to them. You can abuse them. They're not gonna move on you. They're good. Get them all lined up, real rock solid. Perfect 90. As I start to put in a screw here, 1, 2, 3 blocks are moving on me a little bit. I just want to make sure there's a square. Just want to clamp them together. Clamp together, they'll be pretty rock star. Good solid squeeze there. That'll keep them 90. Now I have an L-shaped jig that I can line up my short piece and my long piece with to keep them 90 degrees from each other while I screw them in place. Two self-tappers in and it is rock solid. Now I'm going to set up my 1, 2, 3 blocks in a different configuration. Use it as kind of a bridge to keep that short piece off the ground while I'm screwing together the 2 long pieces. And you're actually looking at the bottom of the whole thing right now. That's where those 4 holes are. And I'm using the clamps here right now not to keep them necessarily clamped together, but keep them in line with each other. So it keeps them straight, because the kind of one of the important things, I need a vertical plane here, that they're exactly the same. So it gives me one flat surface when it comes to resting stuff up against it on the table saw. So I'm going to use my self-tappers here. 4 of them in through the holes, in through the bottom. Quick and simple. I'm going to take off those clamps, knock out some shavings, and the last of my holes here. I need to drill a bolt hole that goes all the way through that'll attach it actually to the miter gauge. So right now I'm measuring. It's 450 thousandths to the bolt center from the plane where it meets up. So I'm trying to get that figured out, make sure I'm accurate. And then here's my math as far as measuring where I need to be for this screw. I'm using 1-inch stock. And I add 450 thousandths to it. And that'll give me my center point for where my drill needs to be. So from there, I'm going to do mostly the exact same thing I've done before. This time though, I'll be drilling a hole for a 5/16 bolt up top. And on the underside of it, I'm going to give myself just a little bit of slop and drill a size or 2 bigger. Because once it's pressed up against it, the size of the bottom hole doesn't matter. It'll just give me a little bit more room to work if I'm a little bit misaligned. So I start with my pilot hole, top and bottom. And then back to the step bit. Like I said, it's a 5/16 hole up top to accommodate a 5/16 bolt. And under that, I'm doing probably a 3/4 total. Gives me just a little bit of wiggle room if it's not lined up straight, so it can line up straight with the actual piece. check to make sure it looks good, but I think it does. Try out a bolt. Looks like I'm going to need a washer between it. There's a little bit of a gap. It's close, but it's not perfect. So a washer should take care of that, no problem. Give me a little bit of room. Beautiful. And now we're actually going to do the adjustment as far as fine-tuning the ends. All I'm going to do is run it through the saw on both sides. So run it through nice and easy, and your saw blade will handle it just fine. Now it's trimmed exactly to the size it needs to be trimmed to. Switch over to the other side. It's exactly the size it needs to be on that side. And keep in mind, this is for a 90-degree cut, straight up and down, saw blade. Shows me exactly where I'm at. And the last thing I'm going to do is a little bit of finishing, just kind of cleaning up my cuts on the ends, making them so they're not going to give any metal splinters or anything, because that's definitely not fun. Just give it a little bit better presentation.
Thanks for joining me on today's Everyday Maker. I just basically solved a problem for myself on this. It will help me out, I think, in the long run. Really relatively easy project. I've got probably $10 worth of aluminum in it. Like, it's really pretty simplistic. Not a lot to it. Handful of screws, handful of aluminum. Pretty easy deal. Good little project. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and reshare. Just help us get the word out there and show anybody you think might find this video useful. And don't forget also, we're accepting contributions from other makers. If it's something that you've got a project that you want to show people, get a hold of us. We'll get it out there for you. Thanks.